And there was one stage where I said to the girl at Georgetown, I said, I feel like going somewhere and grabbing a gun or just fleeing my wrist. I said, I don't know how I can recover from this.
Hello and welcome to Flipped News. What you just heard was a real statement from a farmer's wife who lives in the outback, miles away from any mental health services, friends or family. Today we will be looking at mental health in rural or remote areas. We will be speaking to farmers' wives, rural nurses and mental health government agencies in order to better understand the struggle that our farmers are facing.
I'm Cheree Callaghan and I'm from Seiler Station, Laura, which is in the lower part of Cape York. We've had steady rain since October last year, so we're very lucky. Before that we had our complete property burnt out. So we've gone from drought to grass to now losing water very quickly. The mental stress that it has on your marriage, your children, and then those people around you. Actually, I can't put it into words. It's usually, number one is money, and number two is your relationship. So everything seems to cut down. It seems to, fall to pieces.
Have you ever known someone who has committed suicide?
We had a young boy take his own life at the beginning of the year, and that's affected all of us because everybody's family up here. So if something happens to one family, you gather around. With that happening, and there's been a few other deaths, and with all the other stresses of life, it's really taking its toll. But when you're remote and you're rural, there's some sort of stigma to say, geez, I'm not coping. And so you don't always yell out and go, geez, I'm having a really hard time, because at the moment we're all having a really hard time. And if we have problems, there's websites, and have someone to ring, not necessarily for them to fix your problems, but to say, hey, I'm having a bad day. And not to feel so alone, because most of us are in the same situation. It is truly overwhelming to have one of those days where there's no light at the end of the tunnel, no matter what situation you're in. To make that phone call and to have somebody give you a different perspective could make it all better. Just that moment could possibly save their life.
And do you think this has affected your children in any way?
Well, my 8-year-old son has already picked up on it. He's already working out ways to make a buck. Like, oh, the gold price is up. We got gold here. Yeah, we should go and get some of that, He's already taken on the outside stresses of the world and put them on his own shoulders because his dad's away most of the time working.
And have you ever personally suffered from depression? And if you have, how would you describe it?
Yes, I have. And like I said, it is overwhelming where there is no light. You feel like a failure because you haven't achieved what you were supposed to achieve. You're not where you should be. You're all of these things. We're lucky we haven't had the bank knocking on the door, but if the bank was to knock on my door, yep, there's failure number one. I can't imagine. It's a huge responsibility. Not getting work for your machinery. Where's the next dollar coming from? How am I going to provide for my children? You have all these responsibilities on your shoulder and you can't share it with anybody because ultimately it's your responsibility and you feel like you have no one to turn to. And it's a very, very dark place. And then you start preparing. You start preparing for, okay, well, my kids can go here. These people will take my kids. And you think the world will be a better place. This is the only solution. But you know what? It's not.
Cheree says that on a bad day, she packs the car and escapes her demons.
I get in the car with the kids, I pack a picnic. We just go somewhere. We do something that's away from the telephone, it's away from the TV, it's away from where anybody can get you, more or less. And you change your focus and you free your mind and do stuff that you don't normally do. Or if it's really bad, I get in the car and I make sure I take myself somewhere where I can just go, not coping today. So I guess you have to really push yourself to go, I need to do this, and remind yourself that it's not always going to be that bad.
Helen Brown is also a farmer's wife who admits that she has suffered from depression.
My name's Helen Brown, and we live on Glenburnie Homestead, which is just outside of Inverell. That isolation is a big issue because people don't tend to come and visit you. You really got to beg people to come and visit you. So yeah, the isolation is something that really is very difficult for me to cope with as a woman, and it's one of the things that does contribute to my depression.
And have you ever, throughout all your experiences, had suicidal thoughts?
It really wasn't suicidal. I just happened to pull up to an intersection one day and there was a big semi-trailer coming down the road, and I went, I could actually drive under this semi-trailer and finish it. But my son was only about 1 or 2, or might have even been younger than that, and he was sitting in the back seat. I thought about him and that wasn't an issue. It's more a case of I just want to get out of farming rather than actually suicidal. Yeah, no, to me it is just, life's too hard. I just want to crawl into a hole and stay there and not come out. I'd want to run away and hide and curl up in a ball somewhere and go to sleep and let the world carry on without me. I don't know how my husband would describe it. The most common phrase he says is my get up and go has gone up and gone, When he didn't suffer from depression, he used to just look at me and go, well, get up and get over it, And I found myself saying the same thing to him. And I knew that it was the wrong thing to say. Lots of times I had to stop myself from saying the same thing. Just get over it, I wouldn't class it as being severely depressed, but it's still there.
Bill Seires was another local farmer who succumbed to depression. Bill admits that he battled the black dog, as it is known in the outback, for over 20 years, and barely controls it now with medication.
Where I was in the South Burnett, fairly sizable cattle property, running it with 2 brothers, and during impossible drought years, impossible government years in terms of the interest rates flying up, and had 2 children, which was lovely, but somehow it all got lost and I went mad, and I'm now living in the city, unfortunately. It's still with me, it's still a horrible stigma. It somehow was a relief to me to find out that some of my down moods and general misery was controllable, but then you go out and try and tell that to somebody and they look at you weird and say, should you be locked up? I wouldn't say I had lots of friends. I'm a bit of an odd person, I don't know what friends are really. What is a friend? I want friends, I feel lonely. That was another thing 2 years ago, the loneliness, the feeling of loneliness, even though I was there with 2 brothers and my own family, I felt incredibly lonely. Nobody knows me in Ipswich, almost nobody, and I can walk down the street and I don't have to feel self-conscious or anything because nobody looks at me and says, oh, that's him. Whereas if you're a farmer and you go out on the road or to the local show or whatever, town even, and your self-esteem is being held up and examined, not physically but in your mind, every time you go anywhere, every time you meet any other fellow farmer, because you like to feel that you're doing well, but the real reality is that you're not doing well. Then how do you go out to your fellow farmer and feel good about yourself? Total suicides of people that I know of is up to about 12 now. The last friend I had to commit suicide was father of 4 children, lovely, lovely man. Of all the people in the district, you look at him and think he was just one of the people. If he showed up on the horizon, you'd have a smile on your face straight away because he was just such a lovely, friendly fella. I didn't see the suicide note, and apparently it was garbled, but it was basically saying things like, I'm not good enough for anybody, and I can identify very much with that feeling. And I don't know, I think country people just have a totally different outlook. Maybe that's why they're killing themselves, because they despair more easily than city people. City people just go down to the bar or have their cappuccino or whatever and watch a computer game, but country people are closer to the reality of life.
Dianne Gill is a rural mental health consultant for the New South Wales Government and says that farmers face a variety of problems that city people simply do not.
My name's Dianne Gill and I'm a rural mental health consultant. My actual background is as a clinical nurse specialist in rural mental health, and I work with a program called the Rural Adversity Mental Health Program. Farming communities have over a very long period of time been dealing with significant stresses from the environment, issues such as drought, flood and fire, increased regulations set by the government departments and decreased income, and worry about their future outcomes generally. And obviously access to services is an issue that is always complicated by time. For some, an appointment in the middle of the day could be loss of several hours. They just can't afford that access. There's also a secondary problem of confidentiality in very small communities and rural remote towns, that when they show up for their appointment, it could be that the receptionist is their next door neighbour or a member of the family. So there's not quite the anonymity that they might receive in a city. And what would be beneficial would be what I call roving counsellors or psychologists that could go onto properties and speak to the farmers where and when they need it, whether it's sitting in the tractor or on the back veranda at the homestead, where A, they're not being seen receiving treatment, but secondly, they're not losing a lot of time and worrying about it even more.
And what steps are currently being undertaken by the government to improve the mental health of those in rural or remote areas?
The way I understand how the money is being distributed is it goes towards directing people to appropriate services, so pathways of care. So those sort of pathways would be directing them towards GPs, community health services or mental health services that are existing. And so the other part of the funding is towards setting up counselling services or support services for rural people. Actually, I would have liked to have seen more money going towards the counselling services.
Rural nurse Anna Burley partly agrees with Dianne, saying that farmers are always going to be reluctant to go to GP services. However, she says the issue stems from them not wanting to talk to a stranger about their problems.
Trying to share your issues is a bit of a problem. Before December, we had people who had not seen anybody else for up to 3 months because they just got into that framework where they just didn't go and talk to the neighbours or make connections with anyone else because the workload is that huge, running waters and doing lips and all that kind of stuff.
Do you think if more fly-in, fly-out counselling or mental health services were available, it would help their mental state?
Well, but they don't know what people are living and breathing. So say someone in a mental health capacity would go out to a community, they'll fly out there, but they'll fly out there at 9 o'clock and then fly out at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And these people just don't know the connections or the issues of people living in that community. So they don't have skin in the game, and then they'll probably move on in 3 months' time to say, no one came to us.
And do you think if there was more of a connection, if someone stayed in that community for longer and built a kind of rapport with people?
Yeah, and it isn't just in a formalised setting. It's the work that's at the local community event like the horse sports or the rodeo or races. It's seeing them coming together for play groups. It's being part of the community that you really get the biggest stuff done. It's being in the kitchen buttering bread at times. And if you want to get with the men, you go out work with them in the paddocks. You go out and do the fencing. That's probably where they'll start opening up. But sitting in a clinic somewhere, that kind of formalised place just doesn't work. It's not going to encourage them. It's again this sign of culture and weakness. And you have to get to a really bad stage in a way to be there. Men in particular won't go and see a doctor unless they've got 3 or 4 things wrong with them and maybe something's fallen off.
Why do you think there is more of a risk in terms of depression and suicide for farmers?
Well, when I first got there, the area was quite a resilient community on a whole, but over the last 7 to 10 years, there was actually a decline in that resilience. And one of the things that I really noticed was things out of their control was the hardest and the biggest impact on mental health. All the decisions that were made by governments and all those decisions that were out of their control made the stresses bigger. And if you couple those with the normal other stresses like, drought and things like that, which most of them, are ready for, if you have these things that are outside what they call their onus of control, I saw a huge impact on their resilience and their mental health. So when you are seeing suicide, you're probably seeing a whole heap of other stuff that's just been simmering along for a while. But the issue is as well, I think there's more suicides of farmers because they have lethality. So they have access to guns and poisons and ropes that, there's sometimes no falling back from it.
Throughout your career, have you ever personally known someone who has committed suicide?
Yeah.
Was that hard for you to deal with?
Well, it's not a task. There's no, it's not a clock on, clock off kind of thing. I mean, that's an issue that there's still actually, this particular family I'm thinking of has still got problems with.
Although rural depression is still a major concern, through the help of health nurses such as Anna Burley and government organisations such as the Rural Adversity Mental Health Program, there is hope for the situation to improve. I will leave you with a quote from Cheree Callaghan. Good night, and I'll catch you on the flip side, Australia.
And remind yourself that it's not always going to be that bad, that the sun's going to come up and then it's going to go down, and guess what? The moon is going to come up and it's going to go down. And at the end of the day, the big picture for us is, as long as we have our family, we have our health, really nothing else matters.